Once again, there's trouble over Brexit in the British Parliament. Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has backed the UK's permanent membership of a customs union within the EU. He's claimed this would be good for British business and avoid the need for a hard border between Northern Ireland and the south of Ireland, which continues to be in the EU. Mr. Corbyn believes it is possible to have full access to the European markets even after the UK formally leaves the European Union itself. However, while Corbyn accused the Conservatives of having no economic plan and no plan for Brexit, Conservative Prime Minister Theresa May hit back with a speech of her own. She has insisted that Brexit means the UK cannot and will not remain in a customs union. In her plan, the UK must become free to sign independent trade deals with other countries, with a clean break from the European Union. The diverging European policies between the Labour and Conservative parties have created strains inside and outside Parliament. The pro-Brexit side accused Labour of creating a cynical attempt to frustrate Brexit and play politics with the country's future. At the same time, the pro-Brexit public fears that staying in the economic arrangements with the European Union could dilute the idea of a true departure from the EU. Should the UK leave the single market? And is immigration the reason why so many people wanted to leave the European Union? Simple questions with important answers. So here's a very simple question. What do you think about Jeremy Corbyn's Brexit vision? That's what we put to the British public. Here's what they said.
I don't know too much about that, but I feel like he's not been particularly strong in communicating what the Labour Party's position is on Brexit. I'm a Labour Party supporter and I would have preferred for him to be a bit more vocal and maybe provided more of an opposition to Theresa May.
I think it's a different way to look at it, but at the same time, it's kind of like, why don't we just stay in the European Union then, rather than come out?
I think it's evolving in the right direction. I think he has a really difficult terrain to navigate with kind of Labour's support base being as diverse as it is. So he's been careful, too careful for my liking, for where I stand on Brexit, but I've kind of understood why he's been cautious. But as he's seen, I think, public opinion shift, and he's seen Labour's base shift, he's taken the right steps, I think, towards the right position.
I think he could be more vocal. You don't really hear a lot from him in the way that I think that obviously the opposition needs to really stand up to what's happening. That it's all it seems quite out of control, and I don't really think he speaks up enough.
I think he needs to do a slightly more effective job of articulating a coherent programme. I think the perception, whether rightly or wrongly, is that he's not committed to a certain path. And I think it's up to him to correct that perception.
I would say I'm quite pleased that he's decided to stay in the customs union. I think there has been a slight lack of clarity from Jeremy Corbyn on Brexit, and I think that a lot of us Remainers would be really pleased if there was a little bit more of a sort of soft Brexit vision. Yeah.
It's really interesting that at last we're getting some specific details from the Labour Party about their idea of what Brexit should look like, because previously they basically sat on the fence. But now we know that they're going for soft Brexit, as it's called. In other words, to stay in some sort of customs union, though not the customs union that exists at the moment. But still, Jeremy Corbyn, in his speech in Coventry, was ruling out membership of the single market. And that could be quite problematic, not least for the situation in Ireland, because if we're not in the single market, then it's hard to see how there would not be a border with border checks between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. So there are still some answered questions, but at least now we know basically Labour Brexit is a soft Brexit.
Well, I think the problem is it's not clear whether it's the customs union, which is what exists inside the European Union now, or a customs union. If it's the former, and he's basically saying we're going to stay inside the EU without having a vote, I think it's going to cause some trouble among some Labour supporters who considerable tranche of Labour supporters in chunks of England voted to leave, and they're not going to take kindly to this. If it's the latter, which he's saying, well, he wants to negotiate a completely new customs union, I don't think the European Union are going to take kindly to this. In their terms, they don't, as they've said, they don't want a bespoke deal, a made-to-measure deal. They're not going to accept this. And they seem to be playing hardball in that. So while I think Jeremy Corbyn has discomfited Theresa May, which is probably not difficult to do, I don't really see this as a viable solution. But I think in the short term, I think he has succeeded in discomfiting Theresa May. So that's no small thing.
We asked the public here in central London what they think of Theresa May's Brexit vision and if they feel she's doing a good job. This is what we found out.
If we knew what it was, maybe I'd think about it and have an opinion. I mean, it's basically non-existent, isn't it? So it's been infuriating. Yeah, I don't know if the Tories have a clue.
I think they've taken too much time to do it. I think it's an all right job, but too much time is being wasted. I think too much politics is being played in it. So, yeah, and it's just a power play, really, isn't it? By to hold on to power, I guess, here. So, yeah, she's trying to please everyone, but it's taking too much time.
I don't think she has a Brexit vision. I think she literally thinks, I'm just going to execute whoever's in the room right now telling me something, I'm going to go along with that. And the next day she's in a different room, different people. So I don't think there's a vision except for to try to get along, and it's not really working out. So no, she's not doing a good job at all.
Well, I find her difficult to support because I'm not convinced she's very honest and that she really believes what she's saying, and that she's just going along with what she thinks the public would want to hear, but she doesn't understand us at all.
It's difficult to answer that because I don't know if anyone else in her position would do a better job, because a lot of it is down to the intransigence of the EU. And again, I think she's facing similar problems to Corbyn in the sense that she's not expressing or giving people a coherent and fixed vision as to what she actually wants to do and what she wants to get out of a Brexit. So people aren't really sure what to think of it. People aren't sure what her plan even is.
No, obviously. I think it's just actual incompetence, and she doesn't know what she's doing, and the country's in real trouble. Yeah.
Theresa May has been trying to satisfy the right wing of her party, what we might call the arch Brexiteers, who basically don't like the European Union, would like us to be completely outside the European Union and to try to make our own deals with the rest of the world. But that is easier said than done. So what Theresa May has been trying to do is to persuade the European Union to offer Britain effectively a bespoke deal, a made-to-measure special deal for Britain. Clearly, from the Brussels end, that has not been welcomed with open arms, and there's a lot of negotiation that still needs to be done. But whereas Labour was going for soft Brexit, it still seems to be that the Conservatives fancy a hard Brexit, so no customs union, no single market, and instead a one-to-one trade deal.
I don't think Theresa May has a Brexit vision. I mean, I think that's the problem. And I think the problem seems to me that it's inside the Tory party, given the divisions, it's coming down to two things, which is either a kind of, we're leaving the European Union, but we're not, which seems to be what people like Philip Hammond and indeed Theresa May, and a kind of Little England, Jacob Rees-Mogg vision of we can go it alone. And there doesn't seem to be, there never has been since the morning of the referendum result, a plan B. For one illustration of that, and I remember Theresa May, after one of her first visits was to India, Prime Minister Modi said, yeah, we're very happy to do a trade deal, but what about immigration, what about visas? And she said, oh, no, we can't do that. We can't open up to immigration or visas from India. Well, to my mind, the first place I'd probably gone looking to make a deal was India, and I'd have turned around and said, well, Britain could do with all these computer technologies, these whiz kids from India, let's open up. I mean, we've got a historical relationship with the country. But no, that seems to get in the way, so there doesn't seem to be a vision.
Both Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn want to stay away from the single market in different ways. But does the public think the UK should stay in?
No, I'm pretty anti-Brexit, so I'd love to just rewind time and maybe not have to be dealing with any of these questions.
You know, we voted, we decided as a country we wanted to do what I think is probably irrelevant now, but I do think that we should have probably stayed for the time being. I mean, more countries want to join, it's going to get bigger, it's going to be better than what we're going to go into now, obviously. There's no getting back from it, but yeah.
I don't think it's as, Brexit doesn't solve the issues that, if people have concerns about immigration, I think by and large they're concerns that people have about their own sense of opportunity, and opportunity isn't actually compromised by immigration the way that some people think.
I think it's a really difficult question because I can understand why we want to leave, but it just seems like the consequences could be so severe that it's all like obviously being rushed through with that referendum that shouldn't really have happened because people didn't understand what they were voting for. So, yeah, I think really that they should stop and do a referendum again so that people understand what they're actually voting for this time.
I think it should stay in the single market, yeah, definitely. I think it's been such a stable market for us to be in for such a long time now that to leave it is really throwing the UK into sort of definitely potential economic crisis if it doesn't find anything new to deal with. And I think, yeah, either way it should maintain its...
Yeah, I think single market is the option which would be best suited to the British economy as it stands at the moment, yeah.
Yes, I think it should stay in the single market. I mean, I'm a Remainer. I think we should have never left in the first place. But yeah, I think that, if we are going to leave, we shouldn't, cut off our noses to spite our faces, yeah.
There are huge benefits to being within the single market as Britain is and still will be until March next year when, in principle, we leave the European Union. It's interesting, the single market was actually a brainchild of the Conservative Party. Mrs Thatcher, when she was Prime Minister, pushed it, and Lord Cockfield, as the relevant commissioner, actually brought it into place. It's wonderful for businesses being able to trade right across the 28 current members of the EU without tariffs and controls, but also for individual citizens as well, because in the single market we benefit from freedom of movement to work, live, study, do whatever we do, all through the 28 countries. And I really regret the idea that this may be sacrificed by leaving the EU.
Well, I think the problem is now, I think there has been a result. And I think the problem is, whatever way you voted, I kind of think you have to respect the result. And if you don't respect it, I think there's going to be a section of the population in England who are going to be driven literally mad by this. They voted to leave Brexit because in many ways, they were giving the establishment, the elite, a kick up the backside. It will confirm every one of their prejudices if somehow the people in Westminster decide that we're going to overturn the election result. So in a sense, I think we have to stick with the result. We have to make the most of it. But my frustration, and I think everyone's frustration is there doesn't seem to be a plan B. I think most people are quite turned off by just the detail of it just now. But I think at the end, they will be quite electrified by what the final deal is. And at that moment, that's when I would hope we begin to see an opposition. And I think it's good in one sense, Corbyn, going back to your first question, Corbyn has shifted his ground in this, because thus far Labour hasn't really provided much opposition on the European. It's not been that coherent. This time, if Labour gets its act together with dissident Tories and others inside the House of Commons, they have got a possibility of overturning Theresa May on that final vote.
52% of those who voted in the European referendum supported the UK's exit from the European Union, while 48% voted to remain. For perspective, the UK's gross domestic product is £1.6 trillion a year, compared to the EU's £12.4 trillion, making the European Union the largest trading bloc in the world. For comparison, the Commonwealth of Nations, which Britain may increasingly trade with outside the EU, has a GDP of only £7.6 trillion.
Despite the economics, some claim that immigration and border controls are why so many people backed Brexit. But what does the public think? And is immigration a priority for the United Kingdom?
I think it's definitely had a big effect on people, but I think the biggest issue has been that the Conservative Party has huge hang-ups about how it feels, and maybe sort of post-imperial dreams that seem to have got in the way of actually listening to what people really want in the country.
I'm from Essex. We voted UKIP, every MEP, MP, all of that. So I would say yes. It's a big thing. They just don't like what's happening around them, and they think it's immigrants that are affecting it. So I guess yes, my answer.
I think they should say, yeah, I think so. I think when people decided in their 52% last year to leave the EU, it's never been that clear, really, to many people what the EU comprises. What are we leaving? What are we staying in? All the different agencies, all the different agreements that EU membership comprises, and even being outside the EU, what other arrangements we could have. I think staying in the single market is the best course for the country.
I think immigration is really important, but they should have been doing that anyway. It's not just an issue for to do with Brexit. It's something that they should have been doing for a long time. But I think they have clamped down quite a lot anyway. So I don't see that there's a need to stop Europeans coming here, which could be a consequence of Brexit.
I think it's really important. I mean, it's important for a lot of people coming to the country. People, especially with partners, like myself, who are from the EU. That's it's a really big issue, and I think it's got big economic implications as well. I think it's one of the biggest issues. I think with Brexit, is immigration and border control and things like that. So I definitely think it's one of the.
For some people, of course, it is. For me personally, no. The question of the EU for me was always more about the EU's inclination to be slightly anti-democratic, slightly authoritarian. But for some people, immigration is at the top of the list. For me personally, no.
I think it was used as a reason to get people to vote for Brexit. For me, I think that it's quite silly to destroy ourselves economically for those reasons. But actually, I'm not against immigration. So.
Undoubtedly, one of the reasons that the Leave side won in the referendum in 2016, albeit narrowly, was the issue of immigration, which is quite sensitive, not so much here in London, which is a multicultural, vibrant city, but in some of the provinces where some of the local people felt under pressure from large numbers of people coming in, particularly from Eastern Europe. But the irony is it's not European immigration, which really has been the main immigration into this country in recent years. It's been from former colonies, now parts of the Commonwealth. There are ways and means of limiting immigration, but we have to acknowledge, and I welcome the fact, immigration is good for this country. We have benefited hugely from it, especially in London. And there are ways and means of controlling numbers without actually leaving the European Union. And leaving the European Union won't affect the numbers of Commonwealth immigrants at all.
I think immigration is an issue for people in what was UKIP, which is disintegrating, sections of the Tory party right wing. I do think it's over-egging it to say that the reason why people voted to leave was simply because of immigration. I think it's much more complex. And as I said, there's a lot of quite run-down communities in England where I think they were voting really to give not just the government, but giving the whole sort of political establishment a kick up the backside, given what's happened to them over the last 4 decades. It's something we're seeing around Europe. So yes, immigration was there, it's a factor, we shouldn't just dismiss it, but I don't think it's just a simple explanation of why there was that leave vote.
And so we asked the central question: what does the public hope will happen when the United Kingdom does leave the European Union?
For us to climb in a hole and stop causing problems, probably, yeah. I wish it would all go away, but I don't think that's going to happen. So I suppose what I'd like to see happen is for normal, sensible, right people, thinking people to actually be heard a little bit more, get the voice of being moderate and reasonable out there a little bit more, and step away from some of the slightly more loony positions.
I think we should go about our own ways. If we're leaving, then we should make a big deal of it and go out there and find something new for us, I guess. I think we're thinking of the horizon and bigger and better things, so I guess that's something we should go head deep into, I guess.
I suppose if and when we do leave, to stay as close as we can to the institutions that actually do support jobs in this country, that support freedom of movement. I think people will really realize what they're missing if we don't have the same rights to live and travel and work in Europe as Europeans have had here. Maybe once that context is clear and we think, oh, this is really not helping us, we're worse off, that maybe in 10 years' time, who knows what, people might reconsider, might be an opportunity to talk again.
I suppose we're going to have to be quite entrepreneurial about how we move forward from that point. So I'd like to see a really strong leader in government. At the moment, I just feel that we haven't got that. And unfortunately, David Cameron, in a way, was a strong leader, but he went and did the referendum and wasn't able to carry on. So we need a fresh face in Parliament.
I'd like to see it maintain a strong relationship with the EU, and I'd like to see that a lot of the similar things that were happening with the EU already maintained. You know, I was strongly against Brexit, so you know, I would like to see many of the things that were already in place maintained, and I think unity is much better than division, unfortunately. So yeah,
I think the UK needs a massive reformatting or resetting of its economy. I think there needs to be a lot more public national investment, and this actually goes with or without Brexit and with or without the EU. I think the British economy has some significant problems in terms of inequality, wealth distribution. So, I mean, obviously this will have to go hand in hand with Brexit, but even if there was no Brexit, I think this would be a serious issue anyway.
What would I like to see if we left the EU? I would like us to stay in the single market. I would like us to remain in the customs union, and I would like us to basically for things to carry on as they were as much as possible.
My ideal scenario clearly is that Brexit proves impossible, and therefore we don't go ahead with it. We probably need to have a new vote, a new referendum on the terms of the deal, and if the British public rejected that, then we'd stay in the EU. If that's not possible, then as a second best solution, it would really be the Norway option. In other words, to have close trading relations with the EU, which would include freedom of movement, and accepting EU rules and standards so that we can trade on an equal basis. It is a second best, but it's much better than having no deal and being outside the EU completely. So I'm still hoping and praying that we can stay in the EU. That's really what is best for Britain, and it's not just a personal opinion. Most of the experts believe so too.
Well, I actually would like to see, if the UK was going to leave the EU, I'd like to see the UK reforging its position in the world, not looking to the United States of America for certainly pursuing that slavish alliance with the US. I think looking to countries like India, China, South America, the developing economies around the world, and recreating a whole outlook on the globe. That doesn't seem to be happening. It seems to be either this choice is it's either Europe or it's kind of some crazy neoliberal vision of Singapore off the coast of Europe, or indeed the alliance with the United States. I would like to see us creating a much more equitable economic arrangement and actually social arrangement with countries like India, and recognising the fact that we've depended on importing labour. We don't train labour that much, we import it. You know, so if it's not going to come from Europe, where else do we look? Well, I would look to a country like India. You know, having been to India, it's got what we need, you know, the computer whiz kids and all the rest of it. We should be building a relationship with a dynamic, expanding economy, and of course China and other countries around the globe.
So the divisions between Theresa May's Conservative government and Jeremy Corbyn's opposition Labour Party continue, as their visions of post-Brexit Britain increasingly diverge. The two parties now have a clear difference of opinion. Conservatives want a clean break from the single market, while Labour want to stay in some kind of customs union.
After the apparent clarity of the Brexit vote, it seems that increasingly the referendum is being rerun by Britain's two major parties. Perhaps those who voted for Brexit might have expected a bit more clarity from their politicians over the country's most momentous decision in 50 years. Perhaps it shows that in reality Those in charge have hot heads about the issue, but when it comes to knowing what to do, they're totally out in the cold.